Hey everyone, what is going on? I'm Matthew Oliver, and this is Stillwater Alchemy, the podcast, episode 16, Venus Retrograde, Frequently Asked Questions. On today's episode, I'm answering your questions, questions that I get time and time again about Venus Retrograde, debunking these myths, and spilling some insider tea on my own personal experiences with these questions. So, let's dive in, shall we? So, first and foremost, I want to say that many times, many times, a little bit of common sense goes a long way. And to have discernment, just because someone says they're an astrologer, someone speaks confidently about astrology, does not give them free rein to speak on astrology, right? We know this, but I just want to emphasize this again, that your body will tell you what resonates and what doesn't. And if something is truly meant for you, including a relationship, including a job, including a home, and you're meant to experience that energy, that relationship, that experience, you are going to experience it. I don't think no matter what someone says or doesn't say is going to prohibit the human from going into that experience. So please keep that in mind when you are maybe being convinced or persuaded by someone online, or a friend of a friend said this astrologer said to not do this or to do this during a retrograde or an eclipse or a full moon. Like, it's your life. And I really want everyone to take ownership of that, because it doesn't make sense when I get the same questions sometimes and people are still fearful of living their lives. It's okay if you make a mistake. It's okay if you do something and then learn the lesson a second, a third, a fourth time. But just please keep that in the back of your mind, that there are no absolutes. Even in astrology, there are people that do things on certain transits that I would never do, and they tell me they have a good experience. I'm like, whoa, like I personally think that's a little wild, but it's their life, it's their choice, and they never asked for my opinion. So, with all of that said, let's dive into some of these commonly asked questions and chit chat. And these questions as well, no matter what other transits are in play during a Venus retrograde, this would still be my professional opinion on each of these questions. And then there would be an additional layer of what other transits are going on during that specific Venus retrograde, and how does that affect your own personal chart? Because, like I said, there's so many layers in astrology, and sometimes there are pretty confident yes or no's, but then there is an asterisk, or there might be certain elements in play and certain timing techniques that either amplify or decrease how potent a yes or a no would be for that individual. So it is always beneficial to have an astrologer that you trust if you wanted to get even more exact information on any transit, including a retrograde. So just a brief recap. Venus retrogrades happen approximately once every 18 months, and they last for 40 days, 40 nights. So with a Venus retrograde, you've experienced many of them before. And the first question is beauty procedures. Is it a yes? Is it a no? Can I get Botox? Can I get filler? Should I avoid it? What is the whole situation around that? And there was kind of a sub question about this, of getting Botox for jaw pain, for headaches, and things of that nature. And remember, if we're talking about pain, that's more so Mars, because even Botox is a needle, right? Needles, knives, that all falls into Mars's category. If you're getting Botox for non-aesthetic reasons, that has nothing to do with Venus. So that's a whole other category. So that wouldn't matter per se. You'd still want to make sure there's like ideal Mars and Mercury energy for precision, but that's not aesthetic. So we're not worried about that with regards to a Venus retrograde. If you've never gotten Botox or filler before, I personally would not recommend getting it during a Venus retrograde, right? The reason why is because during a retrograde, a planet is slowing down. It isn't at its highest potency. So if you were, let's say, on vacation and maybe checking emails once every 3 days, once every 4 days, and you're the CEO or you're a manager, you have a lot of power at your job. If you're not as active, then you're not able to use your knowledge, your talent, whatever it is to help your employees, to help give that energy to your job. So why would you expect Venus, who is slowing down, to give you the best results? And Botox filler, the time, the money, the potential side effects. Why would you want to get these things done during a Venus retrograde if you've never got them done before? For some, it causes a lot of anxiety or stress of just going and getting a procedure done. So again, it doesn't make sense to go do those things for the first time. And I have seen clients get unfortunate results during a Venus retrograde when they got filler. And especially in their lips, and they got swollen and bruised, and they had to go back and get some of it dissolved. I've had clients get Botox for the first time during a Venus retrograde, and they had like their eyebrow was just like weird and like frozen in a way that they didn't like, and then they were really embarrassed because one was an influencer, and they didn't ask my opinion. They just went and got it because their friend recommended this person. They were home before they were traveling again, and then they felt kind of pressure to get this done for the first time. And so I have seen firsthand negative results of getting Botox for the first time, filler for the first time during a Venus retrograde. Now, if you always get Botox and filler and you routinely go, fantastic. This isn't something that you're getting for the first time, and this is routine. This also falls into the category of haircuts and hair coloring. That great, you already get the same haircut. If you're wanting to drastically change your haircut, get a brand new hair color that you've never gotten before, again, I would not personally recommend that. We're wanting to use Venus's power to your benefit every time we're going to drastically change or amplify your beauty. Venus does not have full capacity when she is retrograde, so it wouldn't make sense to try something brand new for the very first time. And I've had again DMs come in on Stillwater's Instagram of people being distraught and saying, I didn't listen to you. I went and now I feel horrible and I spent all this money and I'm gonna have to wait. I just get these DMs over and over and over again. So again, you can do whatever you want. If it were me, I would want Venus to have as much power if I'm going to be spending three, four, five, 800, $1,000 on a beauty procedure, if not more. And if it's a surgery that you're wanting Venus to bless you with, and this isn't just Botox or filler, you best believe I'm going to be looking at Mars, the moon, and not just Venus, Mars, and the moon, and of course, Mercury for precision during the operation or procedure, but I'm also looking at the recovery time after, because with a lot of procedures and surgeries, there is a recovery time after that can be minimum a week, if not a month or more. And I've worked with clients who go and get major procedures. And I look at everything, including moon phase, moon sign on the day of the operation. So that I am very specific with, but for most people, it's just the routine things with beauty procedures where if it's routine, great. I also gave this example on the alchemy point. Like, I personally wouldn't add a brand new skincare item to my regime during a Venus retrograde. But let's say you know there's a moisturizer that you really like that you've used in the past, and then you went to something new and you're like, actually, that moisturizer is kind of my holy grail. And you went back to get that moisturizer during a Venus retrograde to put back into your arsenal, then that would make sense, right? We're going back to something and we're giving it a second chance, or we're reappreciating it during a Venus retrograde. So then that makes sense, right? Venus retrogrades are a phenomenal time to go back to something or someone to further give gratitude or further derive more blessings from that item. Number two, what should we do about going back to one's ex partner, ex lover? Is this possible? Is this a good idea? What is your advice on this? So, this is actually funny too, because last Venus retrograde, that was like end of July to beginning of September of 2023, on season two of And Just Like That, the sequel to Sex and the City, Aiden, spoiler alert, Aiden, Carrie's ex-lover, actually comes back into Carrie's life. And Samantha Jones also makes a cameo appearance on the final episode. So we have like both an ex-lover and an ex-friend coming back. And that's why I love astrology. It's not just in our universe. in these other kind of like parallel universes of TV shows that have their own cosmic divinity, these themes of retrograde still manifest, which I think is mind-blowing and incredible. So here's the thing. I get all the time too, just coming up in another question too of like relationships, love, love, love. And I'm truly curious, and you can be introspective about this so you can see if this comes through. How many times has an ex-lover come back into your life? And for some people, especially if you're a Venus dominant, maybe this is a lot where ex-lovers come back, they slide into your DMs. But is this actually a relationship that you even want to entertain? And something beautiful about retrogrades that we can really embody is that when we take time to slow down, whether we're reevaluating our health, our career, our relationships, where we're at in our life, it gives you a chance to reflect, often to see how far you've come or where there's still work to be done. And you're like, I thought I had healed this and maybe I need to go back and re-examine certain things in my life. Or you're like, maybe I'm being a little bit too hard on myself because I have done so much growth. And so if we're at any retrograde, but today we're talking about Venus retrograde, and an old lover comes back, most times you would pause and say, because this is what everyone loves to say to me. I've done the work, I've learned the lesson. Great. If you've done the work and an ex-lover comes back into your life, would you entertain them if they haven't done the work? Great, they're giving you attention, they're being sexy. If you've done all this work, spent all this time healing, and they haven't, why would you entertain that? Perhaps the lesson or the sign or the symbolism of them coming back at this point is to show you how far you've grown and all the work you've done. Fantastic. Maybe there is a conversation of closure for you to get clarity. And if that's what you want, fantastic. Then that's a beautiful Venus retrograde manifestation of even greater understanding of how you show up in relationships and what lessons you have learned. The one thing as well where you can get more specific about this is that if Venus rules your fifth house or your seventh house, fifth house has to do with romance, sex. The seventh house has to do with long-term partnerships. So if your fifth house or your seventh house is ruled by Taurus or Libra, then it might be more common for you specifically to engage in ex-lovers or ex-relationships during a Venus retrograde, because no matter what sign Venus is retrograding in, those houses are always going to be stimulated and activated during a Venus retrograde. And then depending on the year, and where Venus is retrograde at that specific retrograde. If Venus is retrograding in your fifth or seventh house, then that can also be another layer where you can examine, oh, this is why an old lover is likely coming back as Venus is currently retrograde in my fifth house or in my seventh house. So then that can also be why some people experience it more frequently than others. And I've had an experience where I reconnected with an old lover, and this is one where I know we've had many past timelines together. When we first met, it was so obvious that we had such a familiarity with one another. He even said at one point, he's like, "Oh, I told my friends that you and I are soulmates," like right after we first met, which is many moons ago. And I remember going to meet him during this specific Venus retrograde. I'm like, how interesting. I wonder how this is going to play out. Because that'd been a significant period of time from when we had last talked to me re-meeting him during this Venus retrograde. And I'm not sure if any of you have experienced this where you want it to work. You're like, on paper, this relationship is perfect. It's like, why can't I make myself feel the feelings of wanting to be in a relationship with this person? Like, it'd be so easy. They have everything I want in a partner, but I just don't feel it. And when I was able to have that day with them and to talk with them and see how much I had grown in that time span, I was like, oh, I am grateful that we had this day, that we got to connect. It was really fun, but that I don't see a long-term future with them. And they didn't like hearing that at the time. And we were able to clear some things up. But even when we met another time after that, they were also able to understand. Now I see what you were talking about. Because I'm so intuitively driven, and I'm not going to force something or do something for the sake of doing it when I know it's not right for me. That's just never been in my nature. And it was nice for me to have that experience during a Venus retrograde because I'm also human. I'm also going through these transits. So it's not about me being pious and being on a high horse and telling humans what they should and shouldn't do. I've lived these transits as well so that I can also give my own perspective on moving through these energies. So in my case, it really was affirming that it's like I've grown a lot. Yes, this person's amazing, but it's not aligned for you. And even after that situation, this specific past lover had a very interesting trajectory that I know it wouldn't have worked out. Like if I would have tried to force a relationship, I know they would have said yes. But the way their life has transformed is just interesting because I'm like, I wouldn't have been a part of that life. Like it wouldn't have worked out. So it just would have been for convenience and for ego, not actually for alignment. So that is what I also would encourage is asking yourself, am I only interested in this person because I'm lonely and it's convenient? Or have they also done the work? Are they also going to therapy? Have they spent the time and the money and the emotional labor elevating their frequency so that we can best serve each other, not me just getting some extra snuggles and sexy time? Like, truly ask yourself these questions. And if you've both done the work, fantastic. Then this is Venus bringing you back together to both show you how you've grown. But I talk about this a lot about how everything in life is a mirror, and that humans that we meet, whether it be quote unquote good or bad, they're mirrors for us. So I don't know why you'd want to look into a dirty mirror and then wonder why you don't like your reflection. If you're with someone who clearly isn't aligned and you're trying to force it, you're just looking at yourself in a dirty mirror instead of taking the time to clean the mirror and to honor and to appreciate what is reflected back to you. So if it's aligned, fantastic. But truly be honest with yourself if that ex-lover coming back in is actually going to best serve you and the relationship and Venus, let's say, moving forward if you decide to engage in that. And one final thing as well, like if people are sliding into your DMs like ex-lovers giving you attention, you don't need to respond. You don't need to heart it. You don't need to do anything. You can be like, yep, still got it, and keep moving forward. Just putting that out there. Question number three. Starting a new relationship, love, job, friendship, is this a good idea or not? So this often is very commonly asked in terms of a romantic partnership. So I start a new romantic relationship. I'm really curious in this person. What should I do? There is a mindset amongst astrologers that if you were to start something brand new that you've never done before during a retrograde, that it's likely not to last long term, happily ever after, let's say, which can be very scary and anxious for some people. But let's really break this down. Not everyone is going to be married for 50 years. Some people are going to take breaks. Some people are going to divorce and then get back together. Some people are going to get married multiple times. Some people might not ever get married. Like we need to be a little bit pragmatic and realistic about this so we don't allow anxiety to rule our lives. If you feel called to be in a relationship, if someone has been pursuing you and you really want to date them, then date them. No one's going to stop you. I don't want you to let superstitions get in the way. However, you can also look at a Venus retrograde in dating people to really truly see if you've done the work, if there are still things that you're anxious about, if you're still worried that they're going to text you back, if you're going to say the wrong thing, if you're not beautiful enough, smart enough, rich enough, those energies are going to come up during a Venus retrograde, right? Our self-worth in relationships, how we perceive our beauty in relationships, our status, that is all going to come to the forefront. So again, it's also a really beautiful time to date just to see where you're at. So, like, I did this experiment for myself during the last Venus retrograde in the summer of 2023. And there was a wound for me that I had so many people, but especially romantic interest, say that astrology wasn't real. Astrology was stupid. Astrology is too woo-woo for me. I can't believe you do that? Who pays for that? Like I kept getting that feedback, so I took it upon me during that Venus retrograde, which again is basically only 6 weeks, to go on dates and to verbally say out loud, I love astrology. This is a devotion. If you're going to ridicule it or denigrate it, we are not going to move forward. And people would be like, are you kidding? Can't we just hook up? Like, that's so stupid. And I would just instantly block them. I was like, I don't need to engage with this energy in a romantic setting. And it was very liberating for me. I'm like going on these dates. I'd probably go on like one or two a week just to heal this wound of like, I'm not going to allow a devotion, something that I love so much, to be ridiculed or to be a stress or like a subconscious fear that I'm not going to be able to connect as easily or this is going to be a challenge. And truth be told, ever since that Venus retrograde, every single person that I meet is like, it's so sexy, it's so cool. Tell me more about your business. I love that you help people. Every single person. So again, a Venus retrograde is only 40 days. It's literally nothing. If you want to start a new romantic partnership, fantastic. There will be shadow elements that will come through, and Venus will slow you down to be like, have you actually worked on this? Are you actually confident? Are you actually secure? Are you actually receiving the love you deserve or not? So, and if you are getting all the green flags and it feels good, then go do it. There might be other activations within your chart that are leaning towards moving into a romantic relationship. If it were me, like I said, I would do it in a way of what are the subconscious fears or things that I'm going to master in relationships during this time. And if it all works, great. And like I said, not every relationship's meant to last for the rest of your life. So if you're meant to be in this relationship for a year, 3 years, to help both people heal, fantastic. Then live your best life. That's also kind of going further into this of people being like, I'm interviewing for a job. What should I do? And if we want to get even more specific about this, yes, interviewing for a job, there's going to be multiple relationships, right? It could be to your superior, it could be to your colleagues, a relationship to that line of work. But you can look to your MC. That's the angle in your natal chart that governs career. And if your MC is not in Libra or Taurus, then your career isn't governed by Venus, right? It might be governed by Saturn or Jupiter or Mercury or Mars, the sun or the moon. So then career isn't as directly affected compared to relationships, right? Like relationships is a key domain in terms of love, intimacy with Venus. And yes, you can still have those relationships in career, but now we're blending Venus with another planet's domain. And that means that we're going to be looking at multiple factors, right? And again, in terms of career, like you might be hired by a certain boss and that boss may leave. And so it's not a bad thing that that relationship isn't going to last long term. It just means that you could really like that manager, that boss, that superior, but they're only going to be at that company for a year, 2 years, 5 years, or you might only be there for a couple years before then you get promoted or before you move on, right? Like that's what everyone always wants. They want to level up, they want to grow. And then when you tell them things aren't going to be long term, they freak out. So it's like, make it make sense. If you're at that position for 6 months and then you get promoted or you move to a different city to get even more money, then great. Pursue that job and then know that there might be an opportunity where you're not going to be there long term for the best possible reason. That's what I'm saying. Not all retrogrades need to be fear induced and anxiety ridden. The one thing I will say as well, this notion of I'm going to be at this job for the rest of my life is very, very fixed energy, right? So the fixed signs are Scorpio, Taurus, Aquarius, and Leo. I had a friend when I was growing up, and she would always travel. And she was like studying abroad and doing all this stuff. And I remember she would come back home in the summers and just wanted like a very casual gig. And I remember the one year she applied to three different restaurants. And one of them was like really bougie. And she was like, I wonder if I just get them all. And she got all the gigs. And then they all were saying it's like we're looking for people that are going to be here for just more than the summer. She's like, yep, yep, yep. Like she had a lot of Aries and Virgo. So again, Aries and Virgo are not fixed signs. She didn't care about being there for a long time. She was a very hard worker. She took pride in her work, but she just said what they wanted to hear essentially to get hired. We were all like very young, right? This is like when we were teenagers, early adults. I remember the 1 year she came back, she just wanted a job for 2 weeks. And she applied to a clothing store, like a very commercial. I will leave the name out. But she applied there and they're like, we're looking for people that want to go up to management. She's like, I love insert clothing brand name. I love it here. I want to grow here. And she had education to back up these claims and a CV and references. And she got the job and she literally was there for 2 weeks. And then she gave her notice and they looked at her and they said, what the F? And she just laughed her way to the airport before her next flight. Like, that's the thing is that, sure, there are people that take a lot of pride in their work and want to be there for the longevity of that career or that position. But don't think just because it's not going to last full time doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. And with that being said, this even goes back to finish up this question of starting a new relationship. If you feel very called to enter that romantic relationship, that friendship, because you've done the work, and now you get to reap the benefit of doing that work to then feel safe, to feel pleasure, to feel powerful in that relationship, then go do it. Like I said, there's likely to be something that'll come up as a mirror or from your subconscious to then really test you to be like, are you truly ready to enter this next level of a relationship? And then you'll move through those energies during the Venus retrograde to then come out the other side and be that much more confident in that area of Venus's domain. Now, question number four. Is it true that usually people break up in a relationship or that relationships will be hard during a Venus retrograde? And this is piggybacking off of question three, which we spent a bit more time on, in that if there are issues that you have swept under the rug, that you've been passive aggressive with, that you didn't want to address in fear of breaking up, offending them, making them upset, then yes, they're going to come up, and that these energies are not going to be ignored anymore. And so, are they going to be hard relationships during a Venus retrograde? Well, if you haven't addressed these energies, then it's only hard because you've chosen to make it hard by not addressing these situations in your relationships. And so it's your definition of hard. It's how you have shown up in these relationships. Are people going to break up during a Venus retrograde? Sure, if they haven't done the work, but people break up every day of the year all over the world. So we can't just scapegoat Venus retrograde and say people are breaking up. You do see commonly, I just feel like because it's part of that collective consciousness where people are reevaluating their relationships during a Venus retrograde, remember relationships of all kinds, that you do see commonly on the news or pop culture that this celebrity couple broke up or this powerful couple broke up because it's not going to be ignored. This is a one point where it's very obvious. It's like if you're studying for final exams and people failing the class need to take it over, then yeah, during that period of final exams, you're going to find out if you passed or failed the exam because that's the time of the year where people are writing final exams. Sure, people might pass or fail exams throughout the year, but during that one specific time is where the energy is most amplified. So if the energy is most amplified where people are looking at relationships, then of course it's going to be a time in that 18-month cycle where we see a lot of people evaluating their relationships, right? A little common sense goes a long way. Doesn't mean that everyone's going to break up. No, this can also be a time like people I'm sure have experienced during a Mercury retrograde, where if you address those wounds, it allows you to go deeper into the relationship, go deeper into the communication. If it's during a Mercury retrograde, that retrogrades get to be a source of great power if you choose them to be. So if you want to address a certain relationship, if you're not feeling seen, not feeling heard, not feeling appreciated, then that is a beautiful time to work past fears of offending them or making them upset or that they're going to abandon you or leave you or whatever that narrative is to go deeper into a relationship. That's kind of what I said with my own personal experience with going back to an ex-lover during a Venus retrograde, that I learned so much about myself and able to speak my truth and being open to admit what I needed in love specifically to then better myself moving forward, not only with that specific lover, but in my own journey with love and my own journey with Venus and how that got to manifest in my life. All right. The last question is, how do I tap into this energy of a Venus retrograde? So It depends on what level you want to go into this. And I address this more in the Venus retrograde workshop, which I'll put the link in the description of this video. And members of the Alchemy Point save 25% off that Venus retrograde workshop. But there's different layers, right? So Venus's domains of love, connection, beauty, pleasure, creativity, it can be simply one of those categories that you are working on. Self-worth, values, of course, are also linked into there. So if you just wanted to work on creativity and going back to a creative project and feeling inspired again by art and beauty, and this can be that you yourself are an artist, or maybe you're just taking time to appreciate art. Maybe you've always been that person to walk in beautiful gardens and go to art galleries and watch beautiful films, and that hasn't been a priority. Maybe work has taken over, maybe life has been very challenging, and you're like, I want to go back to that creative passion or allowing my life to be more beautiful. Then fantastic. That gets to be your Venus retrograde assignment, that is the area that you're focusing on, and you have 40 days, 40 nights to focus on that. You don't have to put everything on your plate for one transit. That doesn't even make any sense. Let's say you are working on a relationship with your sibling and it's been contentious in the past, and you really want to take the time to go deeper into that, and maybe even just reaching out to them and calling them is a really big deal for you. And even having the nerve, the confidence, the faith that everything is going to work out this time because you've done the work and you really want to try and make this relationship work. Maybe that's the main focus point during a Venus retrograde, which is also beautiful. Maybe you are someone who's been really working on your physical beauty and you've been going to lots of sessions, you've been going to the gym, you've been really prioritizing that. And this is the time when you start actually feeling the work, that you can look in the mirror and be more confident about yourself. That this is a time where you're at the end of maybe certain treatments or like going back and forth. And now you're like, I'm so proud of all the work that I've done. And now I can fully embody this and not be as confident or fear laden putting myself out there or just being confident in my own skin. Maybe that is how you're embodying this. If you want to go into another secondary layer, like we mentioned before, looking at the houses in which Venus rules in your natal chart. So the house in which Taurus rules and the house in which Venus rules. And if you're someone that has a lot of Taurus and Libra placements, especially if you're a Taurus or Libra rising, then every Venus retrograde is going to be that much more impactful because Venus is your chart ruler. So for those who are a Taurus or a Libra rising, then you might be reevaluating who you are as a person and how you connect with various parts of your life during a Venus retrograde. So that's like a really beautiful invitation of just examining who you are and feeling, and most likely through deduction, which part of your life is most vocal and loud to work on through that time. The next layer is going to be looking at where in your chart is Venus currently retrograde. So in 2025, Venus is going to be retrograde in Aries for most of March. And at the end of March through to about mid-April, Venus will be retrograde in the sign of Pisces. So you can look at the houses during that specific Venus retrograde where Venus is retrograde, because those parts of your chart are going to be very loud. So for example, I'm currently going through Venus retrograde in my fourth house. I'm selling so much stuff from my house that I've always been meaning to put on Facebook Marketplace, getting these things out. Also, connecting with humans on Facebook Marketplace is very interesting when people are being rude, not responding. And so I just know that I'm not trying to be overly nice. I'm like, if you're being disrespectful, you're getting blocked. If you're being creepy, you're getting blocked. And then I'm also being very direct in following up with people because in the past, and this is just all my relationships, I get annoyed when people don't respect my time and that when they're not good communicators. And then I have even more gratitude when it's complete strangers who are good communicators that get back to me right away. I'm like, great, this is what I value in all humans. So to witness it as a mirror through an app, through a Venus retrograde, just affirms that I enjoy this type of energy in all relationships. And if people are being disrespectful, it just gives me even more confidence being like, I'm not allowing this energy to come in. And to get able to do that in kind of like a home setting of like selling things from my home that I no longer want or need is a beautiful manifestation of this. So The final layer of this is looking to your own natal Venus placement. And for some who don't know their exact birth time, you might not know which house Venus natally is for you. But even knowing the sign that Venus is in and the themes of that sign. So let's say Venus is in Virgo natally in your chart, and you're really working on how you are of service to others. And maybe during a Venus retrograde, you instead of giving all your time and energy away to people as a way of connecting, you pour that back into yourself. You allow yourself to be the main priority during a Venus retrograde, that you're pouring into yourself. Those acts of service and quality time are for you. And only when you feel fulfilled and you're overflowing with love and energy, then do you allow yourself to be of service and put yourself out there to help your close relationships. And then let's say if it was Venus in Virgo in the sixth house, especially, then maybe you're always there to help your colleagues or your subordinates, and you're always there to help them with their problems, their life problems. You drive them around, and now you're like, actually, I'm going to focus on my work first. Maybe I'm always going to take the evenings off. I'm not going to be available online through correspondence after a certain time. So I do want to be there. It is part of your nature that you do love connecting with people, that your colleagues are like your family, but you're still setting a boundary that this is going to be an energy moving forward, that after a certain time of the day, your phone is off and you are attending to yourself to then make space energetically for even more loving relationships that you get to pour into and that pour back into you. All right. So there's different layers of how you can tap into a Venus retrograde depending on what you want. I will say that often when I work with clients, they already intuitively know if they want to put themselves out there, if they want to retreat and be more reflective during a Venus retrograde, if they're wanting to prioritize career, if they're wanting to prioritize health. Like it's usually very loud without even me having to pinpoint exactly where Venus is retrograde. It's coming through. It's more so as assurance. It's more so as any clarity or nuance that comes in by working with an astrologer. And if this is something that's completely brand new to you, completely foreign, this is the first time you're hearing it, fantastic. Welcome. Lovely to have you here. And this is just something, like I said, that not everything's going to completely transform during one astrological transit, but it does give you more evidence. It does lay the groundwork to focus on that specific part of your life and your relationship with that planet, right? So if it's a full moon, you're connecting more with your lunar domains and the connection with the moon. If it's a Mercury retrograde, of course, we get to deepen our relationship with Mercury and its domains and how it manifests in our life. So, in my mind, yes, sometimes retrogrades can be frustrating. There can be delays. It can be annoying. We might not move as quickly as we want in terms of signing contracts, falling in love, getting the results that we want. But if we can honor these times for what they are and what they get to reflect back to us, it takes away the frustration because we know that this is a time where this is what we get to focus on, right? And if we know that, then we can show up in a beautiful way and really examine, okay, this is where I'm at. This is where I want to be, but it's okay if it doesn't happen tomorrow. It's okay if I get frustrated. It's okay if I figuratively or literally land on my face when I go on a date, when I go on an interview, when I look in the mirror, whatever it is, because then you can look back in another 18 months, another 10 years and being like, I'm so grateful I landed on my face because now look where I am now. That would be my final note of reflection, is that if you can take time to look where you were last Venus retrograde, right? Which would have been end of July, July 22nd to September 3rd of 2023. How far you've grown since then in one or multiple domains of Venus. If you can show yourself that reflection in almost what you would go back and say to that version of yourself from 18 months ago, what would you say to them? And then it gets you excited for the growth that can happen. All right. That's all from me. Like I said, if you're curious in the Venus retrograde workshop, the link for that is in the description of this video. If you want to join the Alchemy Point, Stillwater Alchemy's online community, I always post more information on there. There's monthly Astro Hours, which are a live Zoom Q&A where people ask me all the questions to get even more clarity about their chart, about their lives. It's a fabulous resource for those that want ongoing support from a professional astrologer. So I'll put all the resources for that below. And if you have any general questions and you're watching this on Stillwater Alchemy's YouTube, feel free to leave them in the comments and I'll get back to them as soon as I can. Thank you all for being here, and I'll talk to you later. Mwah. This is one thing as well that I really appreciate during a Venus retrograde is me prioritizing Venus. It'd be like if you were going on a road trip with your best friend and it was like a renaissance and you get to rekindle that relationship. You get to deepen that relationship because just you and that best friend in the car, two-seater, huge trunk with all your luggage, all the snacks. What would you want to do? How would you want to get to know that friend, Venus, more intimately? This gets to be a time where, if you so choose and you show up to do the work, you get to deepen your relationship with Venus. Sure, maybe your car breaks down the side of the road and that partnership, that friendship, there's a spat, there's disagreements. You might not get along the entire road trip. However, by the end of that road trip, at the end of the 40 days, you're like, I'm so grateful I did this. I love you so much. And now you have these memories from that road trip, from this specific Venus retrograde for the rest of your life. So if you choose to show up and do the work, I promise you, as per usual, it's always going to serve you well. Okay? You got this.